I wrote speculatively to Jensen because I've always been interested in cars from a small boy. And I remember reading about the Jensen 541 in a book before I left school, and I decided I wanted to work with cars. So I wrote a speculative letter to see if they'd got a job, and I was invited along one Saturday morning by Eric Neal. He was the chief body engineer, and he interviewed me and offered me a junior draftsman's job. A junior draftsman tends to do detailed drawings. So you start off with, when you design a car, you start off with a sketch, somebody's imagination. That would be Eric Neal. And then you start making, you make a buck, a clay model, and from that you make what they call a layout drawing with made up of the individual parts. A junior draftsman, it tends to be a detailed draftsman, so he would have to take one of those parts from the big layout and make a drawing that can be used for production. So the drawing that I would make and my fellow detailed draftsman would then go into production. It would be the pattern to which all parts would be made.
Yeah, I was a punch card operator, which was the forerunners to the computers, and it was that office was attached to the production line. There was two offices. One was the executive side, and one was basically just ordinary workers. The executive side, which is where the medical centre was, and personnel, and obviously the executives, was very plush, very nice, and ours was just, well, it was great fun, to be quite honest, because we did have a laugh with the production line. I used to have test runs in the Jensen, which was quite good fun. I shouldn't have been, so they used to hide me on the floor at the back, on the back seating area. There was no seats in, it's just the driver's seat. And he used to take me for a test run, but I used to sneak in.
The Carter's Green factory, which I guess was built in the 1930s, maybe even late 20s, it was originally a bodybuilding shop by William Smith and Sons, a bit hazy with the W, but certainly it was Smith's bodybuilders, which the Jensen brothers, Alan and Richard, joined as designers, and I think they probably had some equity in the company as well, and eventually they took over. But it was an old factory, so it was very dingy. And after I got the job, I used to cycle. I lived in Aston, not very far away from the Aston Villa football ground, and I used to cycle from there to West Bromwich every day, which was around about 16 miles round journey. So I was reasonably fit. And so I parked my bike in the cycle rack before you entered the building, and my abiding impression that it was, as I say, it was a very dingy factory. And then you went through some steel doors, sliding doors, which most times, well, they were always closed, because then you walked into the experimental department, and of course a lot of secret things were going on there, and they didn't want any Tom, Dick or Harry to go in there and see what was going on. Then on the right hand side there was a little, what we called the cage, and that is where the prototype Volvo P1800 was kept. And then you walked through there and you walked into the drawing office with vertical layout boards, and one of those layout boards had the Healy 100, by which time it had become the Healy 3000. And of course the Healy was the car that made Jensen most of its money and enabled them to develop their own cars without any great need to worry whether whether Jensen cars were going to make any money or not, because they made them in penny numbers. I mean, for instance, the 541 probably sold 2, 3, at most 5 cars a week. They made 5 cars a week.
And we saw quite a few stars. there. The one I remember was Ginger Baker from Cream, but there was Cliff Richard who came, and Henry Cooper, quite a few others really. Penny Plummer, who was the Australian Miss World at the time, she refused to have a photograph taken with me. I don't know why, but they asked me to present her with some flowers, and she says, no, I'm not having a photo taken with you.
But while I was there, I did meet a few, like, with Jimmy Tarbuck, and I met somebody else, Led Zeppelin. The Jimmy Tarbuck incident was, I'd gone down to photocopy some invoices, and I was standing at the photocopy machine with a pile of invoices, putting them through. And I looked out the window and I saw this Rolls Royce, and I thought, oh, who's that? And it had got COM 1C on it, comic. So I grabbed a couple of things, I went running back down to the office, and I said, who's here, you know, like, and the boss, I think it was Mr. Hodgkins, said, oh, I think Jimmy Tarbuck's visiting. And then all the girls, there was 3 of us, we said, well, can we go and get his autograph? And he said, okay then, because you had to ask permission. So there was me, I think Denise, and a girl named Pauline. We went out the office, we walked down the line, because he was at the end of the production line, I think. And as we walked down, I'll never forget it, I was so embarrassed. As we walked down the line, and bearing in mind I was only 17, all the lads got their hammers and they was banging on the line, like, whoa, whoa, you know, like that. And we went up to him, asked him for his autograph. Even Jimmy Tarbuck, I mean, he was young then, he appeared like embarrassed because, you know, it highlighted he was there with the bosses. So that was quite interesting, but apparently loads and loads of stars went there, you know. I can remember Harold Robbins. I wasn't there when Harold Robbins was there, but my cousin worked there as well, a chap named Doug Randall. And he used to read a lot of Harold Robbins' novels, so he was quite excited when he knew Harold Robbins was there, because apparently he's American, I think. And he arrived with a hat and a cloak, you know, very like flamboyant. Dad said about Susan Morn going. I can remember Dad mentioning Susan Morn, but there was loads. I think they used to, apparently, I mean, this is what I've heard, they used to measure the seats for the actual, you know, person who was buying it.
Jensen was a tiny company in car manufacturing, but it laid claim to lots and lots of firsts. I think it was the first production car to have all-round disc brakes, the 541R. You know, it's fantastic. The 541 had one of the lowest coefficients of aerodynamic efficiency because of its curvaceous style. And I think that was coincidental benefit of the styling itself. It just so happened that it was aerodynamic.
People were proud about Jensens and the association with West Bromwich. And it is such a shame that it went, you know, because, you know, when it did go and everybody was made redundant, I mean, you know, they paid up all the other companies first, and so a lot of people, like my dad included, only got severance pay from the government. And when you think that he worked there for 35 years, he ended up with about £1,000. It was sad. You know, Jensens didn't actually pay him, it was the government, they paid this severance. So I've never heard of anything like it before, but yeah, I mean, it was a prestigious company, it was a shame.
You don't realise how much you enjoyed it and what you learned. And that's not only true of Jensen. I think it's particularly true of Jensen because of the kind of company that it was. But the most important thing is you don't realise exactly what you experienced until many, many years afterwards. And in my case, because I started operating a blog and I started writing about Jensen and my experiences of Jensen and the history of Jensen, I realised far more than I did when I was working there. I realised how very, very important and how precious it was. And I think most people I've spoken to, other employees of Jensen, say the same thing, that they've gone on to do different jobs. There's a guy who lives in America now, and we both worked at Jensens at the same time. We were both in the drawing office. He was a project manager. Both of us have moved on. We've had greater experiences, but the Jensens experience, for one reason or another, I can give an answer for myself, stood out probably above all the others. For myself, I think it was because I was young and I was impressionable. And as you said, actually working on the Jensens FF, which is an iconic car, within the overall motor industry history, it does make you feel good that I had a small part in that. But again, didn't realise how important it was at the time.
It's part of my CV. I'm very proud to have said that I worked at Jensens. Not many people can actually say that, and with fond memories. I think when I met my partner here, first time, I think it was one of the first things I said to him, that I worked at Jensens. He was very impressed, which is what you want, isn't it?